Hello and welcome to Set Talks, the podcast that helps you navigate and connect with the Colorado film scene. I'm your host, Nick Fiorella. Today's guest, which I'm very excited about, is Wesley Clark. He is the writer and director of Sirona. Sirona is a feature film about a young woman with supernatural gifts. She escapes captivity only to be hunted down by a group of mercenaries whose lives she will change forever. You can watch Sirona on Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, Google Play, and Vudu. Well, Wesley, good to meet you. Do you go by Wes or Wesley?
I leave it up to whoever's saying my name.
Okay.
I go by both.
Cool. All right, well, Wes, I have an Uncle Wes, so I'm always
okay.
like, okay, yeah, Wes. Well, yeah, man, how are you? How's your day going?
I'm good. Busy day, but not in a bad way, just busy. But
Yeah. I mean, we'll get into it later, but you said, we talked about you're putting on some promotional events for the sequel to this film and stuff like that. So I would imagine you're busy, getting ready to produce this next one.
yeah, we're currently in the middle of a crowdfunding campaign to get the sequel going on top of investor conversations and meetings. So it's a lot of Zoom calls and phone calls and emails and also getting content ready. So it can be pretty busy.
Sure. All right. Well, before we dive into that, let's bring it back to, your video production and film experience leading up to the first Sirona. What led you to making this film? Do you have any experience in video production? I know you said you love to write. Tell me about your video production and writing experience leading up to directing this film.
Yeah. So I can't remember the year, but I, funny enough, kind of fell into film. It wasn't something I actively pursued. Like I've always loved movies, TV shows, anything with a story to tell I just enjoy.
Totally.
And one day I was fresh out of high school, I'd say by a couple of years, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, I know someone that's doing a film here in Colorado. They're looking for extras. Do you want to be a part of it?" I said, "Sure." And then just watching how they did it, I immediately was like, I want to do this. This is so cool.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
so cool to see how the sausage is made. So from there, we groups of friends and I just started putting together shorts and stuff just to practice. Very amateur, something I probably will never talk about because
Gotta start somewhere.
yeah. Just goofy stuff that we through local showings that Colorado Springs does. Colorado Springs does have a network that does promote local talent from all over Colorado that pursue film. It's an event called Show Us Your Shorts, which is just showing short films. And so we would just submit our stuff to that, and you can get good feedback and network there with other people. And just kind of got a feel for how to do it. But there was a sense of it was still a bit amateur. So I did start diving into how these movies are made on all those Blu-ray extras for Hollywood movies that come out. And depending on what they show, it's almost like free film school. They show you exactly some of the processes they do and how it's done. And you just learn a lot from just watching that, as well as just being a part of other productions. Jump forward by maybe 7 or 8 years. Sirona was just an idea that a couple of friends and I were just talking about. We were just kind of everyone we know kind of makes shorts. No one really pushes for a feature length film, which
Right.
Now I know why. It's
Sure.
incredibly hard.
That's been my kind of intimidation of the whole thing. Is it's a huge undertaking. I feel like so, and it's a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah. But we were just let's do something original, because all of our short films were based on stuff we liked, and we didn't technically own the intellectual properties. So we just kind of were let's do something original. And this was a conversation between myself and two of the other main actors in it. The one that plays Alan Cross, his name is Jeremy.
Okay.
And the one that plays Jason Miller, his name is Ben. We're just kind of sitting around, kicking around ideas. And I'm like, well, what do we want to do? And Jeremy's like, well, I really want to be in this really cool military film. And I looked at him, I'm like, that sounds really expensive. I don't think we could do that.
Sure.
But I'm like, what if we, I thought about his idea, and I'm like, what if we just toned it down and made them independent contractors, military contractors. That way you don't have to film on a military base and do all this other complicated stuff.
Sure.
Just guns for hire, essentially. And if you've seen the film, you can see that it's about a girl with supernatural abilities. That stems from my love for comic books. I just love superhero genres, fantasy genres, just anything to do with otherworldly stuff, and just kind of combine the two worlds and just say, what if a girl like that was running around today, like here in Colorado? And uh, the story doesn't take place in Colorado Springs or Denver or anything, because filming in the city can be complicated.
Sure.
So I made it take place in the natural element, the mountains. It's right in our own backyard. You just get some permits and licenses and you're on your way. And little did I know how complicated that would be to film in the wild.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, she just sat down, you wrote the script. Like, tell me about that. Like, how long did it take you to write the script? And
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, so the script, much like most creatives, a lot of people, when COVID hit, there was nothing to do. So a lot of people just took advantage of the time and just started being creative, whether it's videos, whatever. Me, I'm a writer.
mm-hmm.
So I was like, let's just make this idea we've been talking about for a little bit and put it on paper. The first draft took me maybe about a couple weeks. It didn't take very long.
Okay.
Ran it past Ben and Jeremy and got their feedback, their ideas, and really started just hashing it out, weeding it down to what you see today.
Mm-hmm.
The original script was much bigger than what I actually made. Again, I was still thinking too Hollywood.
Okay.
Like it was going to cost a big budget. So I really had to dumb it down and go, how can I do this from an indie perspective?
Sure.
And writing the script, I had to really just take what I would love to make, but also cater it to what can I make and still give a fun, compelling story. So as an indie filmmaker, you kind of have to make sacrifices unless you're going to try and pitch your script to Hollywood.
Right.
So I took at it from another angle of how do I make this more affordable?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it helped shape it into what we were able to pull off.
No, that's cool. What about your approach to script writing? Are you pretty into like mapping out like an outline or a structure for the film, or did you kind of just sit down and like feel your way through it?
Yeah,
at least the first draft anyway.
I had a very, very light outline.
Okay.
Because I knew what I wanted to do, where I wanted it to go, but this also ties into where I'm at today. The story I wanted to do is just too big. It was
right.
By the time I got to the end of it, I'm like, this is like a TV show or at minimum a trilogy of films, because it was just such a large story I was wanting to do. And so then I had to go, well, how do I dumb this down into something affordable? So I broke it into 3 parts. And so the first one is just more of like, how do I kick this off? How do I get people to care about the characters and grow attached to them and kind of understand their story? And then end it with, compelling things throughout. So I kind of had to make a second outline of like just that section of the story of, okay, let's tell this part, let's tell this part, let's tell this part.
Okay.
And left the other outlines for later. And
nice.
So from there, I didn't outline every point. Yeah, there's a lot of foggy cloud, if you will, of the filling of how do you get from A to B.
Sure.
So a lot of that was just kind of creatively on the spot, just going. But with my writing, a lot of people do it a little differently. I could be a little unorthodox.
Honestly, I feel like at the end of the day, you have to feel your way through it.
Right. And
like, it's good to have an outline and stuff, but like you do, it's like you can do all the planning in the world, but you do have to sit down and feel it out moment to moment. Right.
Exactly.
Like, so that's
and,
cool. Everyone's got their own process.
Yeah. For me, I just plug in a pair of earbuds or headphones, listen to, I can't listen to music with lyrics because it starts to pour into my writing. So I actually just listen to like movie soundtracks and stuff just to kind of keep me in the zone of the world I was creating. And the script was more about world building at first, and the characters were a bit light. So that's when I had to go back and go, these characters are bland. Let's go back and like make them a little bit better, more interesting.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just a lot of, I don't know how to explain it, but just more like when you're writing a conversation, for example, I'm one of those people that sometimes if I know I'm about to have a confrontation with someone, I have the argument in my head. And that's kind of how it felt. I was like, he's going to say this person, but this is how I would respond. And then just kind of back and forth. And at first, the conversation was way too long because the scene you don't want to drag out like that. So then you hash it down to what are the important pieces these characters are arguing about.
Sure.
And kind of shape it down from there. Since that point, I mean, I have been mentored a little bit from some professional writers, and have even been recommended some books that have helped me make a lot more for the sequel, which will be, I think, did help me in the sequel script when I was taking a crack at it.
No, that's cool. Yeah, and at the end of the day, just like plowing through it to get the experience of doing the first film, and I'm sure you learned a lot, which we can talk more about that later as far as like,
Sure.
what you would take into the next film that you learned on this one. But so like, you said you raised some money for it. Like, tell me about that, because that's a big thing that most filmmakers are like, oh, if I only had a budget,
Yeah.
and this and that. So like, tell me how you went about raising the money and securing it. And like, was there, like you said, with this event that you did for the sequel, this past weekend, like, did you put together like a whole pitch for the film? Like,
Yeah, it's always a good idea to have it at minimum an elevator pitch, just so if you do have someone in front of you that's potentially interested in, say, tell me everything I need to know within the first couple minutes of talking to you, you're kind of ready. I kicked off the last one with a very amateur crowdfund. I was not prepared. It was myself, Jeremy, and Ben that were just kind of forcing this thing to happen. And we were just like, most of us are going to be doing this for free because we're doing it on our own, but we need to raise money to pay other people that are bringing their talents to us, such as, crew, camera work, even the other actors. And we budgeted it out from maybe like 13 grand to pull it off. Did a crowdfund. It did not go super well at first, but the biggest advice I have for people that try to raise funds is don't just do it online, like talk to people. And that's how I found an investor. I was literally just walking around saying, hey, I'm doing a crowdfund. I wasn't just relying on social media. I was just talking to people, whether it's friends, coworkers, family, whatever. And I stumbled upon someone that goes, are you taking investors? Which is not something I ever thought about. I was just like, oh, I'm just trying to raise money and hopefully I can get it. And here comes someone going, I see an opportunity here. Let's talk. And we did. I pitched them the story, the numbers, all that different stuff. Because we had been making short films up to that point, they saw my past work and kind of the past work did speak for me a bit on like, he's capable. Let's take a chance on it. And they did. And so instead of 13 grand, I got an investor for 50 and gave me plenty of money to pull it off way better than I was originally going to.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about like what went into the pre-production process? So like you had your budget and then it was like, all right, we can spend a little money here. Did you start to like source cinematographers? Like, tell me everything that you kind of planned for the shoot and then.
Yeah. So I actually did things a little backwards than a traditional production company would probably do. I was locking in people before I even had money. Like we'll talk, like it was more of like we'll talk money when we get there.
Okay.
And they were fine with it. And I'd locked in a very talented cinematographer that is my director of photography. His name is Kai Hanchett. I actually got to work with him on a different project that I was assistant directing. And so I got to really talk with him about this upcoming thing. And he believed in it. He also thought it was going to be, he thought it was a little larger than life for what I was going for. But he volunteered so much of his time to help me like drive all around Colorado and location scout. He would bring his camera. We would shoot some areas so we knew what we liked and what we didn't like when it showed up on the camera. Spent a ton of time just driving all over and checking out these spots. And while doing that, we did an open casting call here in Colorado. So I could just see a variety of actors and actresses that wanted to be a part of it. And like I said, this was near COVID, so I got way more submissions than I expected. It was like an upwards of like 300 different actors and actresses from all over, not just Colorado, but like different states.
Yeah.
That were just
Wow.
like, oh, a production, and we're like, oh. But we did it down to who fit the characters the best through. We had people send in self tapes, and
Mm-hmm.
then if we liked the self tape, we would actually set up an in-person audition to read across Ben or Jeremy as characters, and then I would give them a slight bit of direction if I wanted to see how they can handle their scenarios. And um, the person we casted as Julie in the film, who's our sharpshooter, her name's Sarah. She just showed up and crushed it. Like it felt right. Like she knew exactly what she was doing, and part of the reason that is she's a very experienced actress. She's no longer a SAG actress, but she did come from LA. She actually lives in Colorado right now, but she's been part of like big productions. So
Oh, cool.
she's not green. She knew what she was doing, which is good. We needed experience because again, these are a bunch of guys that dream of making films that didn't really know what they were doing, and we finally have an expert that at least can act.
Yeah, no, I thought she had a real great presence in the film.
Yeah.
Same with you, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I thought your part was excellent. I honestly, if I had to guess, because I know you said you were in the film, and then I watched it and I only talked to you on the phone, so I didn't know who you were. Like, I don't know. I was expecting, you to randomly be like one of the guys that got killed at some point or something, like where you're just in the film, like a Peter Jackson moment or something, where it's just like a side character that you needed someone, so you stepped in to do it. I didn't realize that you were like essentially like the comic relief of the film. And I loved how you worked in all the like jokes about like, you love these comic book movies and stuff. So I'm assuming that comes from your own
Yeah,
kind of joking.
I wrote a character that loves the things I love.
Yeah.
You also, like as a writer, just want to give people some kind of connection, and that's why I kind of was aiming for different character types. And so my character was more of like the in for people that love pop culture, and they may not care for the sci-fi genre necessarily, or military stuff or guns or whatever, but they're like, oh, I've seen those movies he's talking about, and now they're instantly connected to the character.
Yeah, totally.
And so, yeah, my character was not intended to be played by me necessarily. I was just planning to direct it. But again, with such a tight budget, and at this point, we didn't even have an investor. I was like, you know what, just to save money, I'll just play this character because I wrote him. I know him in and out. I can probably do it.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, like, can you talk about like planning for the shoot in terms of like locations, storyboard? Do you storyboard, or did you guys kind of just focus on like getting coverage?
Yeah. So storyboarding is incredibly important, but it's also important to have someone that knows how to actually do art, so you understand what you're looking at. And again, it's not something I had in my budget. I've since learned there are programs you can purchase to help you do that, which I'm definitely going to be doing this time around. So the director of photography and I just kind of did a shot list.
Okay.
And fortunately, this guy and I were just on the same wavelength, so he knew exactly what I was thinking when I was describing it. There were certain moments where he would draw a very crude storyboard to go like this, and I would say yes or no to correct it, but
Okay.
we didn't officially storyboard the whole project just because neither of us were capable of drawing. But we did, it was a combination of doing the shot list, having heavy communication, and then actually going to the locations together. He would take test shots of me and go, is this what you're looking for? And I would say yes, and then just kind of shaped it from there.
That's cool.
As for locations, that was at the grace of just so many really, really nice people that live here in Colorado. A lot of friends and family. I pulled a lot of strings just in favors of people that owned properties and just let me film there.
Oh, nice. That house that you guys filmed at was great.
Which
Kind of
one?
the main cabin like location.
So the cabin is actually someone we didn't know. That was an Airbnb.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
I, to make sure I didn't get sued and just take a chance on filming somewhere and getting in trouble later, I reached out to a ton of people that owned cabins throughout Colorado, through Airbnb websites, just saying, hey, I would like to book this, but here's what I want to do with it. Are you comfortable with it?
Sure.
Got a lot of no's, but also got a few yeses. And the cabin that's in the film was from a very sweet guy that owned that cabin, and he, if anything, he called me all excited. He's like, "You want to put my cabin in a movie?" I was like,
Nice.
"It's not a Hollywood movie, but yeah." And he goes, "It's still cool. Let's do it."
Oh, that's awesome. Hell yeah.
So,
It was a
uh,
nice cabin too. I like, good location.
kinda. You wouldn't know
Hmm.
it, but that cabin is literally, if we shift the camera a tiny bit, right off a highway,
Oh,
which made
really?
for a lot of complicated shooting.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. It
Yeah.
looked like it was in the middle of nowhere. So yeah,
Hmm.
you guys did a great job with kind of fooling the audience with that. Nice.
Yeah, it's all about camera placement.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Well, cool, man. Well, you touched on the actors. I was going to ask you just how did you source some of the actors and stuff? Were they
Hmm.
all local? So it sounds like they were. And
Yeah, all for one. The guy that owned the cabin in the film, he was a actor from New Mexico. Um, we did run into a little bit of trouble, so we had to do a last minute casting, and he was the only one available, and got him in pretty quick and got his stuff knocked out and sent him on his way. So it was originally 100% local, but then unfortunately we had to have an actor bow out due to some other obligations they had.
hmm.
So it left me in a pinch to recast, and so we almost got there. It was almost 100% Colorado. I would say it's like 99% Colorado
Yeah,
now.
no, so that was the guy that basically first comes upon or is helping Sirona.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, cool. So he was the one that was like, "Yeah, you could film at my cabin."
No, so that's just the actor that quote
Oh.
unquote owns the cabin.
Oh, I thought you meant owned
Yeah.
it in real life.
No,
Okay,
no,
I
no.
was like, really? Wow. All
Um,
right.
no, the owner, he did pop by once just to kind of see the process and stuff, but
Oh, cool.
he just kind of stepped away and let us do our thing because he knew that we would probably not really have time to chat since
Sure, sure.
we only had a week to film there, because otherwise the cabin was actually booked out front to back, I think, for a couple months, so we had a very slim window to film there.
Oh, really? Wow.
Hmm.
Okay. Well, yeah. Can you talk about that, like production? So, like, what was the shooting schedule like? You shot it inside of a week?
Not the whole film.
Oh,
So
okay.
the cabin was actually shot within the full week, which is, I would say, like 70 to 80% of the whole movie. So
Right.
kind of. But we did, a lot of us have regular day jobs. So we had to schedule just mostly on weekends and around people's days that they had off, and just kind of pieced it together. So over time, it took maybe a couple months. But if you shot like a film would normally, the whole production was maybe only 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks total,
Okay.
um, combined with those days. But
Cool. So maybe around like 20 days, I guess,
yeah, yeah,
ish.
I'd say that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's cool. I mean, yeah, and a proper film like that where it's like all in day after day. It's like I
Hmm.
think yeah, a lot of them do take that long. So that's cool. It's not
Yeah.
like it dragged on for a year or something like that, which has always been my fear of doing a feature film. Like, is this gonna,
A lot of
you know?
indie filmmakers find themselves falling into that trap. We almost did ourselves too.
Mm,
It does take a lot of planning and cooperation from everyone involved, because it takes a village. It takes a lot of people to pull something like that off, and it. Yeah, like a lot of indie filmmakers, that even on shorts I've done, I've fallen into a trap where it took forever because
right.
I didn't schedule it quite right, and people had conflicting schedules. So yeah, you want to make sure you build that plan out before you start rolling the camera.
Right.
And so it's very important to just talk to everyone involved and say, can you do this day? Can you do this day? The most important people are obviously your actors, your cinematographer, director of photography, audio, and um, producer. Whereas uh, production assistants and crew members and stuff like that, as long as they know how to do the job, schedule the ones you know for sure will show up for the days they can, and the days they can't, you find backups that can help out. That way, you can make sure you're moving forward smoothly. Sometimes people in our situation just rely on one team and don't expand, and that's how they kind of fall into that, because they'll always have conflicting schedules because stuff comes up, because
Oh, sure.
life happens. So
Cool. Did you have like a hardest scene to shoot?
yes. I would say the most difficult scene, um, I can't give you a minute mark, but it's when the mercenaries are leaving the cabin. It's where my character stumbles upon a very shocking moment. He's tasked with moving a body, and the body does something that freaks him out.
Mm-hmm.
And his team runs out to kind of say what's going on, what's wrong. Anyway, that whole scene, that was our second to last day at the cabin. Now keep in mind, if we did not wrap all of our cabin scenes, the production would have been delayed. We would have had to come back when the cabin was available again.
Right.
So that was our second to last day filming there. That was also the last day that Ben, who plays Jason, was available. He had to go back to work. He was out of time off. He could not stay any longer.
Okay.
So last day for him, second to last day for the cabin. Again, we're off a highway. For whatever reason that day, cars were just flying by like crazy. We typically didn't have much of an issue because most people, I assume, were working. And so the traffic wasn't horrible. But for some reason that day, semis, cars just kept flying by. It was ruining the audio.
Right.
And on top of that, a thunderstorm was rolling in.
Oh boy. Yep.
So in that scene, my character is very stressed, but I was also very stressed as the director of like, we got to get this done.
Right.
If anything, I think the stress has helped me perform in that scene because I was already freaked out.
I thought that scene was hilarious, the way you reacted to it and stuff like that.
Oh,
yeah, and stuff. So yeah, I think
the stress is real when
Yeah.
you're watching.
That's awesome.
Fortunately, we wrapped everything up. There were a few audio issues that we caught, like a car would come by and I just said, forget it, I'll fix it in post. I was then told about a program that I use called Isotope RX8.
Oh,
It's very
I don't know that one.
It's designed, you can get into the grit of an audio, like literally remove
Right.
wavelengths, and
That's cool.
using that program really helped me clean out any audio that I didn't want in there. Now the system's not perfect, otherwise, you know, some people might ask, why don't you just shoot the entire time and just fix it later? Well, one, it's too much work.
Yeah, right.
But two, it's if an actor's voice or whatever sound you're recording matches the same frequency of whatever's disrupting the shoot, you can't remove it.
Right.
So it's always best just to avoid it. Fortunately, most of the cars sound like wind because it's like just kind of flying by. So I was able to pinpoint that particular sound and just get rid of it.
Right. And hopefully it was in that zone of not clipping people's audio and stuff
It
like that.
didn't clip them. Some people's audio, it made their voices sound a little muffled. So I kind of had to really tweak it to get it to sound normal. But we got it there, fortunately. When I was editing, I was so stressed. I was like, you know, this scene is going to be like the worst scene in the film because the audio is all screwed up. But no, it actually worked out pretty well. I was actually surprised and relieved.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I thought the energy of that particular scene was really fun.
That's good.
And whatnot. Well, yeah, like, as you talked about the cinematography, I thought the cinematography was excellent. It felt like most of the shots were storyboarded and stuff. And I just love the composition of this that the cinematographer was achieving with, you know, each shot. It really felt very planned, I thought, with like the coverage and the way you frame stuff up. So, yeah, can you talk about the cinematography? Like, you know, what, who was it again?
His name's Kai Hanchett.
Okay. How did you find him? And, you know, just what camera, like, you know, what was a typical lighting setup, that sort of thing?
Yeah. So Kai and I, like, we're all from Colorado Springs. So anyone that does film out there, we all kind of know each other exist. But I had never really gotten a chance to, like, meet him and just talk with him. Because anytime I had seen him, he was shooting something, so I couldn't really disturb him. But I happened to get that opportunity when I became an assistant director on a film that he wasn't the director of photography on, but he was doing camera operating on, so he wasn't as busy, which allowed me to talk to him. And so I kind of pitched the story to him, and he was interested. But much like I mentioned earlier, we just did a lot of discussions, and I'm very descriptive with my shot list, so he was able to kind of paint a picture of what I was going for. As for, I'm so sorry. What was
like the equipment side of it. So like what camera, you know, what was kind of a typical lighting setup, and a lot of it was outside, but like even then, you know, maybe, I don't know if you're dealing with harsh shadows, if there's like scrim situation, like what would be the typical lighting setup and camera that was used?
Yeah, so for an indie film of our size, typically when you shoot outside, you would love like a huge scrim to diffuse light, or even a bounce light, depending on what you're doing. And none of us had that equipment, so this was all him. I credit him to every beautiful shot we have in this film. He strategically, for example, in the beginning of the film, The mercenaries are seen in like a field just doing a training operation. He strategized where the sun was going to be and always shot the person that was supposed to be standing there when the sun was behind them, so that it didn't hit their face harshly.
Yep.
And then we kind of just rotated the camera throughout the day, getting those people's angles so that the sun wasn't really like pegging them super hard. Because we didn't have a way to cover everybody.
Yeah.
Now, if there's any individual shots that were close-ups, we had like a very small, like circular thing that would diffuse the light a little bit. But that's mainly all we could really do. As for lighting, again, depends on the scene, but like, yeah, he had decent lighting equipment and he was very strategic on where he placed it, you know, to make people look appealing and make the mood look great and everything.
Yeah.
I would say the hardest thing for us was we only had one nighttime scene, but it is fairly lengthy, if you will. And there's no power. Even though we were at the cabin, we didn't have cables long enough to run to the lights, to some of the stuff out there. And so we were running at like 100% brightness, which means the batteries were only lasting, I want to say 10 to 45 minutes.
Oh boy. Okay.
And so we had to hustle for those particular scenes. Anything else that was closer to the cabin, we were fortunate enough to be able to plug in to the cabin's power source so we could run it. I have since invested in a generator
Sure.
that problem. But
cool. What about the camera that was used? Because I mean, especially too, if you're using the sun as a hair light and then maybe a bounce or something like it, I mean, it looked pretty good. So I would imagine pretty high dynamic range of the camera. It looked good.
I don't know all the lenses he used, but he shot the whole thing on a Blackmagic Pocket 4K cam.
Nice, cool.
Which to me is impressive I mean, Hollywood gets to mess with all these super expensive equipment, but I think he got a pretty close look to the Hollywood look with how he was shooting things.
Totally.
Because I know Hollywood likes to take those cameras he used and use them for scenes that they used to blow up cars or something, because they're
right.
they're fairly inexpensive to them anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. What about editing? Like, I think you had mentioned you edited the film, right?
Yep, I edited the whole film. Again, not by choice. If anything, I'm not a fan of editing, and it is a ton of work. Editors can be very unsung heroes, in my opinion. But I did it. But I'm glad I did it. I learned a lot. I gained so much more respect for the editing process, as well as production, and why it's so important to plan everything. Because if you miss something, the main person that's going to catch it is the editor.
Sure.
And the editor's job is also just to make it interesting. Like, yeah, the actors and even the camera work can really make it come alive. But if it's not cut together appropriately, then it could be a horrible movie, even though you shot the best thing in the world.
Sure. And the other side of that coin, I mean, you can use editing to enhance performances and whatnot. And it's really, the final draft of the script, so to speak, for sure.
A big piece of advice I got from an industry professional was like, don't ever edit your own movies. I didn't disagree. I just explained I didn't really have a choice, because I'm not going to ask someone to spend all their time voluntarily to cut this thing together, because it was a lot of work. I've had a lot of quite literally blood, sweat, and tears from editing, because there were times where my computer crashed and I thought I lost the edit. I had it backed up, but still it was just frustrating to go through. It was I can see why editors are why they are so important now, for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, I thought you did a great job. I thought the pacing of the film was really good, and I would assume, somebody saying, "Oh, you shouldn't edit your own film," is coming from that perspective of like, if you edit it, you're going to be like precious about it. Which I didn't feel that watching it in terms of the pacing. I thought the pacing was really good. Almost like I was surprised to hear that you did edit it, because it felt very clean to me, like in terms of the pacing and stuff. So
that's good. I mean, well, I would say the first cut was probably not.
What was the first cut duration wise? Because it was about an hour and a half, right?
Yeah. So the full film is an hour and a half now. The original cut was like 2 hours and 10 minutes. There are some scenes that did not make the final cut, obviously, that did help trim that down. But again, I did get an opportunity to meet a professional editor, and he took a look at the film, and he just kind of said, look out for these types of things to shorten it. And it helped me make the film what it is. So I can't take all the credit because I was mentored a bit. But he really, like, he just voluntarily was like, hey, like, just give me this scene and I'll show you what I mean. And then he does it and I'm like, that's so much easier and it's more fluid and it's so much easier to watch. So after he just kind of gave me an example, I was like, okay, I get it. And he even got to see it. I think he even got to see it again before we released it and goes, yeah, no, that's great. Like, and he even said, hey, maybe tighten this area up or this area up, but otherwise, 2 thumbs up. And he
so
really...
within the scene though, he was giving advice. I assumed you were gonna lean towards like, oh, like if the scene doesn't pass these story tests, then it needs cut kind of thing. But this was like advice about within the scene to kind of trim the fat, I guess.
Yeah, I would say that's the best phrase to use, is trim the fat.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Well, that's sweet.
Yeah, no, the biggest thing I can advise anyone that may have to edit their own film, biggest piece is just take yourself out of it, because like you said, you just want to, it's about the film. It's like, yeah, you put a lot of work in and you don't want it to go to waste. But my investor, who got to see the very first cut, was like, I think this needs to be deleted. And my first reaction was, okay, sure. And I cut it out. And he goes, I thought you were going to fight me a little more on that because you're in that scene. And I'm like, it's not about me. It's about the story. Because if you bore your audience to death, what's the point? Like, you need to keep your audience engaged. So that was a big lesson I learned, is just take yourself out of it. And it's for the sake of the story. It's mainly what you need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. I'm in the same boat, because I have in the past usually edited my own short films. I've never made a feature film, but like I'm ruthless with it. And like, yeah, I mean, ultimately when you play it in front of a group of people, you can feel where it's slow, and it's great that you put that much work into it and all that, but like at the end of the day, yeah, when it's got to play in front of an audience well. And yeah, I feel like I would be happy to pass it off to another editor, but yeah, exactly. Like normally maybe you don't have that. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to edit it. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that as far as like cutting scenes, that even though I'm really into special effects. Like I put a lot of special effects work into this, but it's not really needed, or it kind of adds to it. And it would be better if it ended at this moment rather than this big special effect thing or whatever. And so yeah, no, I agree. You got to be ruthless.
I still have a few moments, like even the film now, I'm like, oh, I should have cut that. Just
oh really?
When it's yours, you always try to find ways to still improve it, even though it's already out there.
yeah, totally. Cool, man. All right. So you did mention that you had worked with Mass Effects Media on some of the special effects. I actually just had them on the podcast as the last episode.
Thanks.
Can you talk about that? Like, going into the film, did you have like certain ideas about the special effects, certain references, and how did you find Mass Effects Media and work with them?
Yeah. So again, doing the film, I already knew in my brain I'm gonna have to do these VFX. But then I land the investor. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have money. I can outsource this, and because I've never done VFX ever, and it was going to be a daunting task to learn for sure. I honestly cannot remember how I came across them. I can't remember if they were just like sending out feelers, because when you do a production, typically you're in the ether, and other companies, whether it's composers, VFX artists, whatever, will see you and they'll kind of naturally flock to you. I can't remember if I was shopping around and I reached out, or if they reached out to me, but we were able to initiate a conversation, and then I kind of told them what we were doing. They gave me a price, and it was a bit out of what I could afford. They were very generous and said, sometimes we pick up different productions that we like, and we'll come a break. We obviously can't do everything, but give us a list of what the VFX shots are. List what's the most important ones, what's semi-important, what's least important, and we'll tell you how much we can do for what you can afford. And so we had a good back and forth. They ended up doing, if you've seen the film, the opening scene where Sirona first uses her abilities to heal herself, and they did the veins on the necks of the guards that her brother kills. Spoilers. And
yeah, if you haven't seen the film yet, definitely go watch the film.
And then they did her sequence towards the end of the film, where she's like kind of having a bunch of mist emitting from her hands and her eyes lighting up.
Oh, cool.
And they also did the mist from her hand when she. They typically did all the mist scenes throughout the film. I would say I think that's mainly what they did for me. However, there were a few things that I could no longer afford them for, and I did have to take another pass at some of the stuff. So I kind of built off what they already did to enhance it.
Yep.
I also, fun fact about the film that almost no one really knows is every shot you see a rifle in that film is a VFX shot because I had to make the barrel bigger because they were BB guns.
Okay.
Which was
so like
so
you like rotoscoped out the barrel and
so I had to mask basically the appropriate barrel size anytime you see a gun.
oh wow, okay.
I would say it actually wasn't for every gun. I would say there's 2 guns that actually had a good fake barrel on them, but there was a couple, such as the one I was using, and I think the one Jason Miller uses that I had to do a VFX shot on. It was tedious, but I did not want the audience to look at that and go, "That looks fake," because they were. So again, just in an attempt to make the audience be immersed, I had to do VFX shots such as that. Also, at the beginning of the film, we're introduced to Sirona's brother. At first, I didn't show him doing anything. I thought it wasn't necessary, but after doing a couple, like a test screen and talking to my investor, they were like, "Oh, you really need to do something for him because if she can do it, why can't he do it?" Made sense. Well, I had no more money for the VFX studio, so I had to learn that myself. And I think it turned out pretty okay. I was actually pretty shocked that I did a ton of YouTube tutorials. Also kind of went back through the VFX studio's shots and kind of watched what they did frame by frame. And I'm like, okay, I think I see what they're doing here. So I just kind of had to duplicate the work just so I could, up the production a little bit on the post side of things.
Nice. What about the title? Was that, did you guys put that together or?
You're talking about the title of the film?
Sirona, yeah, like the main kind of title that comes up. That felt like,
Oh, that was me.
Yeah, cool. It looked good. Yeah.
I
feel like stuff like that kind of really elevates it, like those kind of title graphics and stuff that have that real like cinematic.
Yeah, I do think I was playing with fire a little bit because again, I'm just trying to enhance the movie as much as possible. I think it had both good and bad things that came of it because a lot of people were comparing me to bigger productions because they didn't know what actual budget I had. And so they were going like, "Oh, that seems kind of off for like such a, for a film." And I was like, "Well, okay." Yeah. But they didn't really care to do the research. Whereas other people were like, "Did you see what they did for this budget?" So it give and take.
Right.
But yeah, like I feel like if you're gonna go for it, just go for it. Like obviously, if you make an attempt to make a title card like that and it's not looking good, don't do it because it could hurt you. But if you know what you're doing, YouTube is such a blessing to have. Honestly, there's so many creative people out there that can teach you if you're willing to put in the time.
Totally.
And that's kind of the route I was just taking. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to learn this. Now my goal isn't to be a VFX artist.
Right.
I can do it. And if someone like if a friend of mine's making a film, so, hey, can you help me with some VFX? Sure. Absolutely. But I definitely, this film was my film school, I think is the best way to call it.
Sure.
It taught me so much.
No, that's cool. I'm in the exact same boat actually, like with special effects. Like I can do it and I set myself up for some crazy special effects that I'm always trying to pull off, but I'm definitely like more coming from a filmmaker standpoint. Like I would, if I had the budget, would pass it off in a heartbeat. Right. But sometimes you just get really excited about the special effect and then you're like, oh, I want to see it come to life and stuff. But no, I'm with you on that. Like I love like Video Copilot, and if you've heard of that website, and there's all kinds of tutorials online that can walk you through it essentially. Mm-hmm. So yeah, really, that's cool. There's a lot of great resources to do it yourself if you have to. But yeah, well, so like you went through all that, the grit of making and producing this film, and and then what? Like how did you go about? Because you got to distribute it and stuff. And tell me about that process. Like, did you know ahead of time, like kind of when you were getting investors, like, okay, this is how we're going to distribute it. Mm-hmm. This is what we're aiming for to hopefully make our budget back. Like, walk me through the process of like getting the movie out there and getting a return on investment.
Yeah. So honestly, I was a little arrogant. I charged into this thinking, oh, I can do this, and not just knowing a thing. And I landed an investor, and that is the question: how do we recoup this money, right? The only answer I had was that same project I met Kai Hanchett on. Um, the guy that directed is a friend of mine. His name is Tyler Hunt. The film we worked on together, he got distributed. So I'm like, what'd you do?
Yeah, right.
What happened? And he said, I found a film sales agent that is just going to go out on my behalf and then give me a list of people that are interested in buying it or not. And I'm like, okay, that seems like the safest way, because I will warn people, there's a lot of sharks out there. There's a lot of,
right.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of distribution companies that could take advantage of filmmakers. I've heard of that happening to even people I know. So you want to be very careful with your stuff. His film was out there. It was doing okay, so that made me feel like I could trust it. So I reached out to this person. He saw the film. He was like, absolutely, I'll represent this. Took it off my hands. He was shopping it around. Now, at the same time, my investor actually has a friend out in LA that is a producer, like an actual film producer. And he goes, hey, we made a movie. And he sent it to him, and the guy was like, oh my gosh, like come out to Warner Brothers. We're actually premiering a movie, and let's talk. And that made my heart drop a little bit. I was like, what?
Yeah, totally.
Now, this individual is not like a CEO or anything of Warner Brothers. But he is a producer that makes films based out of there. He does a lot of like Netflix and HBO Max kind of streaming movies, which are just awesome. And again, just another piece that I got to learn. He gave me a lot of free advice, both good and bad. What I did wrong, what I did right. His biggest thing was like, how'd you pull this off for so cheap?
Okay.
And kind of explain some of the bits I've already explained talking to you.
Yeah.
And that's how I met an editor out there, and that kind of ties into the mentor I got. His name is Brett. He's an editor that edits all of this guy's movies essentially, and he's the one that helped me out a lot to shape this while my sales agent was kind of shopping it around. And we got a handful of offers back from the sales agent. Now, it's an indie film with no name actors in it, which if you're making a film, it's a business. It's not just art. And a lot of people need to make sure they remember that. So if you can work a name actor, try to do it if you can afford it, because that really helps sell it. Now, we didn't have that. So in my brain, the business side of me is like, how am I going to get this in front of people? Because ultimately people are like, I don't know who any of these actors are. Do I care? So they may not take a chance on it. So my strategy was, I want a distributor that's going to at least do it globally. That way it's not just in America, just tanks. If I can get as many people as possible, maybe some group somewhere will love it. And there was only one distribution company that offered a global reach. So that's the one I ultimately went with. They're called Good Deed Entertainment. They do a lot of Hallmarky movies, but they have like a subsidiary called Cranked Up that do the more sci-fi, action-y kind of stuff, and that's kind of who got me out there.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, so there's a lot to that too. I thought it was as simple as handing the movie off. Oh no. You have to send them all your contracts and your licenses, if you license any music. You have to send them, you have to put your film through quality control for obvious reasons, and it has to be approved by quality control. There's just a lot of steps on that half alone. And
sure,
what was kind of stressful about that was they were like, yeah, we're going to sign you. We're going to release it this date. Get all this done before that. Oh, okay.
Did you have to do it in like different like languages or anything, or?
No, fortunately not. We had to do subtitles.
Okay.
I believe for different languages, but the quality control company I went through, for an extra fee, will just do that for you.
Okay.
So that otherwise you do have to do that yourself, and no, I
sure,
did not want to do that.
Right.
So I did have to proof watch it. Unfortunately, I did, because there was a few things that even the quality control company missed when it came to the subtitles that weren't like it wasn't translated correctly. Like the line
Sure.
said this, and what it read was not even in English. It just wasn't correct. So I was like, no, we gotta fix that, and just a back and forth with them, and they fixed it. But yeah, there's just a whole. It's like every piece of a film is just like a huge amount of work, whether it's pre-production, production, post-production, and even distribution.
Right,
Like,
right,
there's
right.
just so many pieces to it.
No, and how did it do?
Still doing well. Actually, it's still climbing, and we're actually just a little after a year of it releasing. We amassed. Uh, these are just estimated numbers based on what I'm being told by a distribution company, but a little over, I want to say, 1.2 million views across multiple platforms streaming.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And budget wise, if you can talk about that, like, did you make your budget back and
Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah, like, um, yeah, I mean, like, if you can elaborate on that, I'm just curious, because ultimately that is the business of it, right? Like,
Yes.
can you make your budget back and make a little money for your investors and stuff?
So I'll say this. So there's a little complexity to this side of things. So the investor invested 50K.
Mm-hmm.
I made the production for 43. The film itself made at least, it's still climbing, so my numbers might be off, but at least like 49% more than the actual budget. However, my investor has not made all his money back just yet because towards the back end, it's kind of balls on both of us, just getting excited and kind of he was pouring more money in to try and get the word out without actually strategizing.
Mm.
And so we're still making up for some of that. But the film itself,
Okay.
if we had a good, solid marketing plan, yeah, he was sitting pretty.
Nice. Did you work with this distribution company to like, I saw the website and stuff, like to put together some of those marketing materials and stuff, or was that part of the package that they were like, hey,
That
come
was
back
part
with
of
that?
the package I had to do. I had
Oh,
to
really? Okay,
create
yeah.
all graphics for different streaming platforms. Anything I had they wanted just to help them promote it.
Sure.
So whether it's trailers, cast talking about stuff, promoting the film, whatever, that was all us. It wasn't anything they had to do necessarily.
Okay.
Now some distribution companies may do that for you. I guess it just depends on the contract you strike with them. So I'm not saying all of them will be like that, but yeah, if you're if you're gonna sign with a distribution company, just make sure you read everything thoroughly with your contract. If you don't know what you're looking at, get a lawyer.
Right,
But
right.
just make sure you understand all the things you're about to walk into because it's not over. Even when the film's done, you still got to get a ton of stuff done.
That's wild. Okay. Well, it sounds like you made some really good connections, just releasing the film and then getting it out there. So, like, how will those connections help you on future projects? And what were some of the maybe key connections that you were ones that really stood out to you that you're going to really maybe tap into for the sequel?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest connections are just a lot of new faces, whether it's actors or crew that I really liked. Um, People that are willing to come back and help the second time around. One of my goals here is, I'm sure as it is for many filmmakers here in Colorado, is there's just so many talented people here. There's like a ton of them, and
Yeah.
they're untapped, and half of us may not even know each other. And so the biggest way I feel we can connect is when I do have a project ready to go, I'm doing an open call. I'm like, hey, I'm looking for this, 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 and this. And if those people are interested, they'll find their way to my email and just say, hey, I'm interested. We'll talk. And that's how you can expand your network. That's kind of how we did things this last time. And yeah, I plan as long as the budget allows and the timing works out for everybody. I plan to bring back the same exact people I had last time as far as crew. And even the new connections, like I mentioned, I actually consider him more of a friend now than a colleague or mentor. Brett that works out on those films at Warner Brothers, like he expressed interest in editing my film, which is a godsend because editing is so much work.
Okay.
Again, I have to raise enough funds to make that happen, but if I can get there, he wants to help as well as just. He knows a few professionals as well that were willing to help me as far as sound and coloring potentially and VFX, things like that. So if I can tap into that, that would be awesome.
That's awesome. Which you're currently in the middle of doing crowdfunding for the sequel right now.
Yep.
Can you tell me about that? Like, where can people go to support the film?
Yeah, so we're running our crowdfunding through seedandspark.com. You can do crowdfunding through a lot of different websites, but we chose Seed and Spark because Seed and Spark is specifically catered to filmmakers. It's not for like just random products like Kickstarter can be. And so Seed and Spark, if you're going there, you know what you're getting into. You know it's a film. And we like I told you last time I tried to do a crowdfund, it was kind of a mess. I was doing it myself, no idea what I was doing, just saying like, hey, can you give me money, and seeing if it worked.
Sure.
And this time we wised up and got a campaign manager that's got a good success rate on getting funding for crowdfunds. Now, she was bluntly honest. She said 50% of the time crowdfunding campaigns, especially for films, fail. It is a huge risk. Fortunately, right now we've been up for a week and we're already at 66% of our goal, and we still have 3 weeks to go. So that's promising.
Oh, that's awesome.
Hoping it keeps climbing. But we brought in experts to help us because I didn't know what I was doing last time. And this time around, an actress, a very talented actress that I casted in my film, I was basically setting her up for the sequel. It's basically the villain of everything that's going on in Sirona.
Mm-hmm.
The actress, her name is Mary Beth. She got to read the sequel script after I'd written it, and she was like, we need to make this. And I don't know if that's because she's starring in it or if she truly believes it's a good story. She tells me she believes it's a good story, so I'm hoping that's the truth. Nice. She's been my huge support since launching this thing. If anything, she's been doing more work than I have because she just believes in it so much.
That's all. She was actually the one who reached out to us about the podcast.
Yeah,
I talked to her, and she was very sweet and super nice and cool. And then I think she maybe passed off my number to you, and that's kind of how we got connected.
Yeah, but she's incredibly talented. She I believe she used to be an opera singer. She did get to act in bigger movies.
Oh wow.
Out in LA, she's been part of like a Clint Eastwood movie before, so like she's done stuff. And again, another seasoned actress that I found because I did an open call. She lives here now, and I was fortunate to tap into that talent that exists out here.
No, for sure. Well, what did you learn on the first film that you're going to be taking into this next film? I'm sure a lot of things. So maybe what were some key things that you learned on this film that you're going to apply on this film?
Biggest thing for me was make sure you have a very again, we were small, so it's no one's fault that I had on set. It's just we didn't have enough people. But make sure you have a very reliable assistant director. I didn't have anybody that I could officially hire, so I got people that I've worked with that are directors that could volunteer their time when they could to help me out. But not having an established person, just kind of, everyone has a different style, so it really threw me off a bit when I was getting help. And some days they couldn't even make it, so I had to do it all myself. So if you're going to direct a film and even produce a film, make sure you have the support you need. Hence why I'm trying to go for a little bit bigger of a budget here. Mm-hmm. The budget's not necessarily to make sure it's not to necessarily like pay all the actors more money. It's to expand the help. Sure. It's like, hey, let's get a dedicated this, a dedicated that. Because even last time I didn't even have a data wrangler, which you could get away with, which we did, but it's just helpful because otherwise you're wasting time dumping data onto a computer or a different drive so you can continue to film. Sure. And you need to be fluid with it because on a perfect set, your data wrangler will take care of all the footage. The script supervisor will have all the notes of what takes that you like the most, and then it goes straight to your editor so they can edit as you're making the film. We didn't get to do that because I was my own editor, so I didn't get to edit until after the film was done. Fortunately, we got everything.
Certainly no time to like reshoot anything if you're just kind of, well, I mean, I suppose if you had to, you could.
If we had to, yeah. There was fortunately nothing we had to really reshoot. I did have to do some ADR. There were a few moments where our lav mics were not, there's a little bit of static. And so, and it wasn't, even with the program I had, I couldn't clean it. I had to basically get the actors to ADR it. Yep. Fortunately, there wasn't too many scenes. I say there's probably like 2 scenes that needed it, which luckily, because for actors, it could be very difficult for them to get back into that headspace, especially since they haven't been filming for a few months, maybe even a year, and you need ADR because then they have to get back in that headspace and get into character so the performance feels the same. And
Sure.
it's not as simple as just recording your lines because you got the same voice. Actors, there's a lot that's required of them. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I would say those are probably the 2 of the biggest things. As for smaller things, this is going to sound kind of counterintuitive to what I did, but don't shoot outside unless you absolutely have to. Oh my gosh, that was just such a nightmare dealing with weather. And I mean, a state like California, it's perfect for film because they rarely have to deal with weather issues like that. Colorado, it was like constant thunderstorms,
Wind.
like rain and wind, and
Yeah.
even nature, like the animals. Like there was, you wouldn't even suspect it, but in the woods, where the mercenaries are tracking Sirona, they're like deep into the mountains at this point. That scene was constantly disrupted by a rooster in the distance.
Okay.
Not an animal I was expecting out there, but it was there. And so every maybe 10 minutes you would get a and like the actors would start breaking and laughing because it threw them off or whatever. To me it was making me angry because it was delaying the production. But like there's I actually got a fun little story for you. There's it's actually the opening scene. And I won't say why in case no one's seen the film, but there's a scene that requires Sirona to cry. And it's all quiet, everyone's being professional. The actress is getting into the moment, and then we call action. She starts crying, and all of a sudden, you just hear this really weird noise. And we call cut, and then my assistant director goes, "Who the phone was that?" You know, just like super, super frustrated. Well, it wasn't a phone. It was a flock of turkeys walking through our set, and there was nothing we could do about it until they left.
That's wild. Yeah, they don't care. Yeah.
No. I was surprised they got as close to us as they did. It was weird, but
Oh, that is wild. Yeah.
Work with as many controlled sets as you can.
Sure.
That's the other piece of advice. But
All right. And you have a pipeline to distribute it. So at least you've kind of like, you know where you're headed as far as like what you're going to do with it once it's done. And I'm assuming you'll end up going to the same people. And
I mean, it's a possibility. It just depends. Like now that it's out there and it does have a little bit of success to it, it may attract others.
Sure.
So it all boils down to like the best deal. Like,
right.
There's a filmmaker. He unfortunately passed away. He made the movie called Monsters of Men. It's an indie film, but he had a much bigger budget than I did. I think he had a few $1 million. He even got a more name actor in it. And he gave this piece of advice about he would talk with distribution companies, and they cut a much different deal for him than they did with me. They were like, "We'll give you this much money, but we think this is gonna be super successful." And he was like, "Well, if you think it's gonna be super successful, why don't you just pay me what I'm asking for?"
Mm-hmm.
And just the little business dance that you have to do.
Sure.
And he basically just said, "Don't." There's a lot of good distribution companies, so I don't want people to be afraid of them. But don't let distribution companies push you around either. Like it is a negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
They stand to profit just like you would. And if you have a good product, go with the person that believes in that product the most. And it doesn't also necessarily have to all be about money. It can be like where are they gonna get it placed? Who's gonna see it? What festivals may see? Stuff like that. Now I don't think, again, I'm new, so my advice may not be accurate, but from what I understand, typically you go through festivals first before you get to distribution because that's festival awards and stuff are what get people's eyes on it. But my film, I didn't go that route just because when I think of film festivals, I think of very, very artistic narratives with a very powerful message. My film was just more of a popcorn flick of like, hey, this is superpowers and guns through the woods. And I didn't think any festival would take it, so I just kind of skipped that piece. But fortunately, I found the sales agent that was able to get it out there in front of people. And we got where we got.
So you did send it to some film festivals?
No, I didn't.
Or you did not? Yeah, okay.
Because I didn't think festivals would be interested. So I just kind of ignored it.
All right. Which ultimately, maybe for people making their first film, they're banking on sending it to film festivals and then networking that way to get it distributed. So it's like you kind of already had someone that you, at least the sales guy, to help you kind of get it out there
Yeah.
without that. So that's
You
awesome.
definitely want someone with notoriety on your side if you're not going to go that route. And at this time, I was taking a chance. I didn't know if he was going to represent my movie. So fortunately, he liked it. He picked it up and got it out there. But yeah, festivals are definitely your doorway in. I know, I don't know if a ton of people know this, but it's a guy I kind of look up to. The director that did the last three Spider-Man movies for Marvel. He also just released a movie with Bradley Cooper. Bradley Cooper and George Clooney called Wolves, I think is what it's called.
Oh, I've seen trailers and stuff. I haven't seen it, but
He's from Fountain, Colorado.
oh, really?
And I know he still has family here. And he made an indie film that they shot in Fountain, Colorado, put it in festivals, and now he's at where he's at. So festivals are for sure a good route to go. But I it could be just my pessimistic side, but I think that I just didn't think my film was festival worthy. I was like, I'll just skip that part and see where I can get.
Yeah, that's cool.
Fortunately, it worked out.
Yeah, totally. Well, so how can listeners follow Sirona? I know you mentioned the crowdfunding that's going on right now, but like, website, social media, where can people follow the film and
Yeah. So, I mean, right now, the biggest thing that we could use help with is even if people can't donate, if they follow the Seed and Spark page, Seed and Spark, the more followers you get, they actually give rewards to filmmakers if they hit certain follower tiers, which is awesome. I think it can range from equipment to festivals representation, stuff like that. So following the Seed and Spark page would be helpful. Just to clarify, the old Sirona is still up there. I don't think it'll ever come down because they use it as proof of a successful campaign. So the new film is called Sirona Valkyrie's Shadow. So if you're going to go look it up, make sure you click on the Valkyrie Shadow one. We also have a Facebook and Instagram page where we kind of just post most of our updates to people. We also can do if you want to subscribe via email, if you go to creativecinematudios.com, if you go to the Sirona section of that, you can flip between a Sirona 1 and Sirona 2 tab. And on the Sirona 2 tab, there's an email list you could sign up for if you care to keep updated that way as well.
Oh,
so
cool.
We have a few different options.
What about you mentioned the talent that's around here, and I agree. And actually, that's really kind of why I'm doing this podcast, is to kind of highlight the industry around here. And I do think there's a lot of talent and that people don't even maybe know exists sometimes. It's a little siloed maybe or something like that. So yeah, in terms of like people that would be trying to help you out on the sequel, like how would people connect? And are you looking for any crew or actors? I know you said you're going to use a lot of the same crew, but
Yeah, well, we're hoping to expand our team. So yes, I'll definitely be looking for more people. If people want to get in touch, they can email info@creativecinematudios.com. But I won't be officially hiring people until we have finished our crowdfund and know exactly what kind of budget we're working with. Our crowdfund is set up by a couple of stretch goals, because if we hit a certain goal, we can make it. But I'm also hoping for higher, because that again allows us to expand
Sure.
more people. And the whole goal is to bring those talented people together in Colorado. And I don't want to do it voluntarily. I would like to pay people.
Yep.
So I'm trying to raise enough funds to make sure I can do that. That way people get paid working on a film, especially if it's one they like. So
Totally. And actors, like once you get the crowdfunding wrapped up,
once the crowdfunding's wrapped up, we'll do an open casting call.
Okay.
I'm debating on when I'll do it, because the crowdfund is set to wrap up towards the end of October. I think it's October 24th. We'll be rolling into the holidays, and I don't know if that's a lot of time where people are with family and stuff. So I don't know if I want to do that just in the middle of that, because I don't want to disrupt it.
Sure.
So I may do it in January, but I guess it just depends on where we're at pre-production wise. I know members of my team and I will continue to do scout locating and whatnot throughout November and December and check stuff out before we get into the next year, because most likely we'll start filming, if everyone's schedules allow, by spring, but most likely summer. So yeah, but we'll be making an announcement through anyone that's registered through our emails or on our social medias. and on top of that, I'll be posting it to casting areas within Colorado so people can find it even if they're not following our stuff. So we'll announce it for sure.
Nice. Cool, man. All right. Well, just to close out, and you touched on this a little bit, but, do you have any advice for filmmakers that are, preparing to write and direct their first feature film? Like, what would be your advice to those folks?
Yeah. Biggest thing is learn as much as you can before you dive in. Again, I learned from watching behind the scenes stuff on movies that I own. I also plugged into different projects that are going on here. I don't care how small the project is, there's always something to learn. It may be super amateur or maybe super professional, but there's always something to learn from different people's styles and types. Most films typically follow a similar process as far as like how you're going to get it done. So you can read about it all day, you can watch it all day, but you're not going to really fully understand it until you're doing it
Sure.
with someone, because there's a lot of standing around and waiting. Something I was blindsided by the first time way back when I got to be on a production. I was like, wow, there's just, you got to be quiet. You can't do anything. You have to wait.
Sure.
So it can be a little less glamorous than people think, but if you love storytelling and stuff, there's no other feeling like it, especially when it's done. And I would say one of the biggest pieces of advice I have for filmmakers is if you make something I had to learn, my film, not every film is going to be universally loved or hated. My film, when I started getting both good and bad reviews, it was a little hard. It was hard to take that, not take that personally.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, not everyone's going to love what you did because art is subjective. Sure. So if you find at least one person that goes, oh my gosh, that was awesome, that was fun, you did your job. And so it's not about necessarily fame and notoriety. It's about, like, if you truly love it, make the thing you're loving and put it out there. I'll tell you, I was super scared when the premiere was approaching. I was like getting butterflies in my stomach because you're just putting a piece of you out there,
right,
ready for people to judge whether it's for good or bad.
Sure.
And biggest thing is, just if you love it, just find the people that enjoy it and cater to those people. And if you do that, you'll be perfectly happy continuing to make stuff. As for the piece of learning it, I mentioned the behind the scenes and plugging in, but there's also plenty of books. There is a book that I got to read. I am so sorry, I cannot think of the name of it. It had to do with writing.
Okay.
And it was recommended to me by this editor I met out in California. And
cool. Okay.
after I read it, my sequel script was already written, but I went back to it.
Oh, and reworked
I cleaned it up.
Yeah.
I was like, I learned so much from this thing. It's crazy. Not only to make the dialogue better and the scenes flow better, but like when you can cut the script down, you're already cutting the film down from being too long.
Sure.
And my original script for the sequel was 130 pages, and after reading this book and talking to this individual and another individual I got to work with, got it down to like 110, like immediately, just cut out so much stuff and without even sacrificing the story. So if you're a writer, biggest piece is obviously protect your script, make sure people sign NDAs or copyright it, do what you got to do, but pass it around to as many people that you trust as possible, because well, I'm sure there's a limit, but that was a piece of advice in that book as well. Like, when you give it to more people, you'll get different perspectives, and someone may see something that someone else didn't see that worked or didn't work.
Totally.
And it'll help you shape it to the best thing it could possibly be, because even as a writer, while it is your baby, people will still tear it apart.
Sure.
And you have to be willing to accept that to make it what it needs to be, so that it's a good film.
Totally.
So a lot of artists, especially writers, can be kind of reclusive. Just get out of your shell, share it, talk to people that you trust, and all art is collaborative. Well, I wouldn't say art. I mean, there's some painters out there that probably just crush it without any without any input. But I would say when it comes to film, I would say a lot of it's very collaborative, because it does take a whole team to pull off. So yeah, I would say those are the big few.
No, for sure. Yeah, I'm all about script writing books and stuff. I think it's definitely good to dive into that stuff. And at least, even if you're not going to necessarily use all the structural elements and stuff like that, it'll inspire you in some way, even if you don't take every little detail away from it, you know, and try to format your script to be like this perfect structure thing or whatever. A lot of these script writing books, I feel like, hit on those elements and stuff. But well, cool, man. Well, just to throw this out there again, so Sirona, if you haven't seen it, I saw it and I really thought it was a lot of fun. So I thought it was a good film. So there you go.
Thank you.
There's someone else that really enjoyed it. So yeah. But yeah, you can watch it on Apple TV, Amazon Prime Video, Google Play, and Vudu. But yeah, thank you, Wes, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed talking to you. And I'm a filmmaker, like probably most of the listeners, and I was so curious to talk to you and kind of hear this journey because yeah, it's I've never made a feature film. I've only done shorts, so I was really excited to talk to you and hear how it all went. So I'm glad it was a success.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries. Well, this is Set Talks, the podcast that helps you navigate and connect with the Colorado film scene. Thanks a lot for watching.